Here's what we're doing. Will Marshall wrote an essay called The Hard Question of AI, an Urgent Ask to Steward Superintelligence. Subtitle, Why AI Governance Should Top President Trump's Agenda.
And Xi's.
Oh, and Xi's agenda. President Trump and Xi's agenda. China and the U.S. We're in a race. Here we are.
But we're not, are we? Because we'll get into the essay, but he proposes that maybe we shouldn't be in a race with China. Maybe the US and China should be in collaboration.
Imagine that. So you read it. I read it. Give me your first impressions. Give me where you want to dive into. There's tons, I think.
It's my favorite subject, Jeremy. Existential risk to humanity. Artificial intelligence and the demise of the human species. Artificial intelligence, AGI, super intelligence, and some other layers of intelligence in between. And what happens if it all goes wrong? And Will Marshall's essay is about possible solutions, possible frameworks, ideas, collaborations, and experiments so that AI and humans are aligned and we survive into the future to kill ourselves in other ways that don't involve AI.
Yes, for sure. So everything you just said. And we're going to talk about a little Fermi paradox rabbit hole down the end that will make some sense into what Mark just said. So let's start with the big three: OpenAI, Anthropic, Google DeepMind. I'm going to read some quotes here just to kind of set the tone of where things are and why this essay is important and timely. The first one is from Sam Altman, OpenAI. I think the good case around AI is just so unbelievably good that you sound like a really crazy person to start talking about it. The bad case, and I think this is important to say, is the lights out for all of us. Wow. Boom. Okay. All right. I'm going right into quote number 2. Dario Amodei, chief executive of Anthropic, who we've unpacked his essay, Machines of Love and Grace. If you want to listen to that, boop, boop, boop. His quote, humanity is about to be handed almost unimaginable power, and it is deeply unclear whether our social, political, and technological systems can possess the maturity to wield it. Tech moving faster than our ability to deal with it. 100% agree there. Last one. Demis Hassabis, chief executive, Google DeepMind. The risk of a catastrophic scenario is not zero, so we must dedicate significant resources to mitigating it. A little more of a tempered quote there, right? But the risk of catastrophic scenario, that pours right in, and we're just going right into this essay because it sets a nice stage, I think, as he's talking through this, as Will Marshall is talking through this. So the acceptable risk for nuclear reactors, and there's a lot of nuclear parallels in this essay. The acceptable risk for nuclear reactor scenarios, right? The risk of
catastrophic meltdown.
So we're talking 3 Mile Island, we're talking Fukushima, Chernobyl, all of that stuff, right? 1 in 1 million. 1 in 1 million is kind of that acceptable risk. Not acceptable risk, but that's kind of
what's the odds of me getting hit by lightning tomorrow? Is that more or less than that?
Bit by a shark.
It must, or bitten by a shark must be longer odds than that. There must be more chance of a nuclear meltdown than me being bitten by a shark, he says.
Well, look that up while I'm transitioning to this.
You transition.
That's the acceptable risk for catastrophic meltdown in a nuclear power plant, according to Will's research and essay. The AI translation, I'm just going to read a quote from his essay. AI experts estimate the risk of an AI-caused catastrophic event at 10 to 50%. Quite a big jump in that. And according to what he says in this essay, the risk is coming directly from the people building it. So that's something we'll get into. Mark, do you have any numbers on the lightning or shark attacks?
Some very, very rough numbers, but your lifetime odds of being killed by a shark are roughly 1 in 3.7 million. So 3 catastrophic nuclear meltdowns.
Better than a meltdown, okay.
Can I ask you a question? So we had Sam Altman, we had Dario Modi, we had Demis Hassabis. Okay, three of the biggest, most wealthiest, important people in artificial intelligence. What we talk about incentives all the time. Why are they saying these things? If I had a company that made AI and I told everyone that AI was going to kill us all, that would be bad for business, wouldn't it?
Well, if you remember this, this is a callback to our review of Karen Howe's book, Empire of AI. There was something in there that was really interesting that immediately jumps to mind, referring to Sam Altman and his advocacy for not just the good things about AI, but the potential harms of AI, is like, by coming out and saying this really could be bad for people, governments have to kind of rely on the guy saying that, right? And if you rely on the guy saying that, then you get to be part of how that thing is regulated. So I think there's a little bit of that that sticks out. And I'm not an expert in economic policy, government policy, any of that, but enough to reference that Empire of AI, Karen Howe positioning that reflected Sam Altman's, I think, desire to be at the table when the governance talks were happening.
AI experts estimate the risk of an AI-caused catastrophic event at between 10 and 50%. Well, we check out our episode on prophecy, the excellent book by Carissa Velez, on why you should take this huge range of percentages with perhaps a pinch of salt. But let's go on, because we've painted the picture. This is what's at stake. This is what the CEOs and founders think we should weigh up. They're not saying it's going to happen, but we should be thinking about it. And Will Marshall proposes a solution but he begins with another scary prospect, what he calls the hinge moment. Basically, we don't have much time. Within months, artificial intelligence may achieve what researchers call closed loop recursive self-improvement, RSI, not repetitive strain injury, closed loop recursive self-improvement, which should be CRSI, shouldn't it? The acronym, not RSI. But anyway, the capacity to rewrite its own code to become more capable without human intervention. This is no longer a theoretical proposition. Anthropic has already declared that roughly 90% of the code for its company's latest model was written by its predecessor, RSI. A system that can improve itself without human direction, Jeremy. What does that make you think and feel?
Hal. A little Hal. Let's read. So in the
I will not open the bay doors. Yeah.
Right. So let's go back at the end of the essay. There are a couple more quotes in here that are really interesting. Elon Musk.
Oh,
I think AI is one of the biggest threats to humans. Okay. Mira Murati. We remember Mira from Empire of AI, right? Former CTO of OpenAI, Thinking Machines Lab. So there are a lot of hard problems to figure out. How do you get the model to do the thing you want it to do? How do you make sure it's aligned with human intention and ultimately in service of humanity? There are also a ton of questions around societal impact, and I think there are a lot of ethical and philosophical questions we need to consider. It's important we bring in different voices like philosophers, social scientists, artists, people from humanities, and Mark and Jeremy from Paper. Mira, wow, that's amazing. Really
that is a compliment. Thank you.
Feel very special. Feel very special for that.
She didn't say that, just to clarify.
Mark, you're busting the dream.
Well, we've just been kicked off Spotify for breaking copyright rules, Jeremy. So we've got to, maybe we should tell the truth so we don't get.
Have we really?
One of our episodes has been taken down, an old episode from over a year ago now, because there was an 8-second snippet of Ghostbusters, the music from Ghostbusters in the background when we were talking about virtual reality, and Spotify a year later have flagged it and globally banned that episode for breaking copyright.
How was that music played? Was it played in the context of a discussion around Ghostbusters, or was it?
It was about the history of augmented reality, and one of the first use cases of augmented reality were these backpacks on I think it was Stanford University, a guy at Stanford University, and they looked like the Ghostbuster backpacks. So I put a little bit of the Ghostbusters music behind that as we're explaining
Ah,
that story. And
not
so,
allowed.
yeah, but as we're talking about AI, and I'm happy that Spotify have banned that episode globally because we did break the copyright law. And imagine if these big technology companies were just going around stealing people's work and music and stories without their permission, what kind of world will we be in? So, I think they're setting a precedent that thou shalt not steal.
I'd like to, on behalf of Thinking on Paper, I'd like to publicly apologize to the Ray Parker Jr. family, because I grew up with that song, and man, I danced around to that song, and I appreciate the value of it.
So
we-
it wasn't so according to the cease and desist notice,
oh man, this is going down a rabbit hole, but let's keep it up.
it wasn't Ray Parker. So they've said the artist was George Doherty. Does that mean anything to you?
No,
So
so
I don't.
he actually
No,
wrote the song.
it might not even have been the real Ghostbusters song because I didn't want to put the real Ghostbusters song. So that I think that is actually George Doherty made his own version of the Ghostbusters song. Actually,
Okay. Well, hopefully he got permission to do it.
well, ah, the meta irony goes down so many layers. Right. Sorry.
All right, so we're on this hinge moment, and basically what Will Marshall is talking about here is the existential threats aren't fully defined or realized, but they're coming quickly. We can see them. We can see this, like this, seeing this cloud firing at you very quickly, and you don't know what the cloud's going to eventually be when it gets here, but it damn sure is moving fast. And even Alan Turing back in 1951, as Will writes, here's a quote from Alan Turing: "It seems probable that once the machine thinking method has started, it would not take long to outstrip our feeble powers. At some stage, therefore, we should have to expect the machines to take control." Okay. So acknowledging, yeah, he was acknowledging it in 51. I think here's the challenge though, man. As long as there's this race to the top, it's hard to look at the repercussions of the end result of the race while the race is still going, because the race is powered by money. The race is powered by the drive to need and control a market. And there are a lot of things that kind of fall to the wayside while you're racing.
Yes, many things fall to the wayside. Ethics, responsibility, accountability, truth, for example. That long ago, people were already thinking of the worst case scenario. So, okay, it's always good to think of the worst case scenarios because then you can work to avoid the worst case scenarios. Reverse engineer what you want by describing what you don't want. It's interesting though that long ago, obviously, one of the name at the beginning of computing said this. How many of his students took on that thought process? Like it kind of almost like this negativity, this AI is going to kill us all and take over the world, has been passed on from one great computing mind to the next. And now you have.
I wouldn't call it a negativity though. I don't think. I would call it I mean, I didn't know Alan Turing, right? Of course, but like reading about him, reading things he wrote, he doesn't seem like a very, like, I'm going to be unobjective about this thing. It'd be very objective about, here's a thing, here's a capability. Hey, we made some shit work, but you pour jet fuel on this stuff down the road. He's just looking and seeing, the evidence of what could happen. I don't see it as a negative thing. I think it's a
Yeah,
great responsibility of a someone like that to say that early on.
yeah, it was the wrong choice of words, but it reminded me of another of the godfathers of AI, Sir Geoffrey Hinton, and he's come out and he's doing the rounds because he's said similar things that if we don't get a hold of this, that the fallout could be existential for humanity. And it reminds me of Frankenstein a little bit, that these people have created this monster. Obviously, Frankenstein was actually, it was a good, but it was society that made him, turned him. So like, it just, there's echoes of that kind of Frankenstein where the people create it, and then after they've created it, they start saying, "Oh, what if it all goes wrong?" I mean, that there was afterthought, not forethought.
Well, yeah, I mean, it goes back to we're really good at creating new technology. We're terrible at making sure it is for the good of our species versus the bad, or not just the good of a small segment of our species, which I think is what we're probably going to witness in the coming years if some of these safeguards aren't put in place.
Well, let's go utopia. So anyone who's been to the New Thinking on Paper website will see that every episode features on the doom to utopia scale. We're all about the good and the bad. We want both sides of the story. So there is no question, there is no doubt that today's large language models are, well, let's quote, generating substantial economic and scientific value, compressing research timelines, expanding access to expertise, enabling new forms of environmental monitoring. The reliability and security challenges at this level are significant, and new forms of environmental monitoring. So there's a lot of positive, there's a lot of good. How do we make sure that we continue along that path and not the other path?
Well, what happens when we get to AGI and then we're like, people like loosely understand what that is. And then this article references ASI. And that was the first time I actually heard ASI as a term that was written here, artificial superintelligence, which is, quote, I'm quoting Will Marshall here, systems whose capabilities exceed human performance by margins that are difficult to conceptualize. Shit getting so good that we don't even know what it can do with how good it is. Like we can't even explain what that might look like because we haven't seen it. We can't imagine it. Like we can't, like in our minds, imagine it even.
It's like the AI equivalent of what's on the edge of the universe, like what's beyond the universe. You can't conceptualize, you can't imagine that. Like what is beyond super AGI is this intelligence which we can't even conceptualize in our heads.
This is such a weird comparison, but I saw this little video today that kind of made me chuckle a little bit. So club sports, meaning like travel sports for youth, like not just the recreational level. These are the folks that are a little better. You put them on teams, you take them all over the country and stuff like that. And there was this one silly video with like a parent to parent. And it's like, hey, Jimmy, you should probably join this Cobra travel team. And they're like, nah. And like, well, you should join this Cobra Elite superstar travel team. They're like, nah. And then like third one, you should join this global superstar, superhuman, intergalactic elite squad. And they're like, yeah, that sounds awesome. Right. So here's why do I say that? And why is it? So I'm keep thinking like, here's AGI and here's ASI. And then what's after ASI? Like we can't even like think and imagine, but it's coming and it's always coming and something's always coming. But what the author of this essay talks about doing is advocating for, hey, let's freaking grab it by the shirt and sit it down in a chair and make it behave at least a little bit, right?
Yeah.
So, which sounds really silly, but you get where I'm going. There's a section called the competitive trap, which is really interesting. It falls back into the race dynamic. This, me having to outdo you and you having to outdo me, and I'm getting more clusters and more network and more power and more utility grid. And hey, I built my own power station and hey, my network is this, and it's just rise to the top. All the meanwhile, like capital is just like flooding into this, so it's fueling. And so no one's going to stop because the money's rolling in. I'm going to build and I'm going to do and all of that. Here's what's interesting. Well, Hassab is, back to Google DeepMind, the more AI becomes a race, the harder it is to keep the powerful technology from becoming unsafe. Absolutely. 100% agree with that. But how do we go,
Is that true though? Is that true though? Because, okay, let's just use my simple non-ASA mind for a comparison. Let's talk about race cars, Formula One cars. The race to get faster Formula One cars made the cars safer. Why does the race make it become more difficult to keep things safe?
This race isn't doing all left turns. This race is going all directions all the time.
Well, let's think about another technology. Okay, aeroplanes, that would be the same thing. So it's similar to cars. We can't use that. What about?
Safety's on guns. Safety's on guns.
Well, you're an American. You're an expert. You tell me about that.
Oh man, low blow, low blow. I don't have a gun. I actually don't have one. I don't have a Second Amendment right sticker on my car, any of that stuff.
I
But
think that question needs a caveat, because I don't think that the more something becomes a race, the harder it is to keep it safe. I think it depends who's in the race.
well, this is tricky because you have countries racing countries, you have companies racing companies, you have providers providing things to the companies in the countries that are racing. It's
Yeah.
complicated, man. This is the most complex of systems.
As Will alludes to, if we could take something from our history of human, our collective history, something which was and has the potential to extinguish us all. And if we could take that, there must be something, or we must have created something in the past that we could use as a model for this. Is there
Maybe
anything
even
you think
talked
we're
about
doing?
this. Maybe even talked about this. I'm thinking on paper at some point years ago, didn't we?
We did. What was it like? Nuclear weapons. Yes, the nuclear model. Will, if you're listening, Jeremy brought this
Not
up
if you're listening. They're listening if they're listening, right?
2 years ago. So maybe you should come on and think on paper. We can discuss this. We can kick the can around the nuclear field.
Yes. No, it is a very interesting model. We've talked about it before. We've also talked about the Martin's Clause, which we did a whole episode on the Martin's Clause. If you don't know about that, boop, boop, wherever the pop-up is, you can go listen to that too. The nuclear model is interesting, right? Because the technology was moving fast. The technology has or had and has the ability to basically extinguish the whole of the globe. So at some point there had to be a way, this is starting to get out of control. How do we get this going? And there were a couple things that happened. One, a race,
Yeah.
right? So the US was out in the lead, then the Soviet Union kind of came back in pretty quickly, and then the Cold War started and there was this back and forth. So when you have that kind of thing going, and you're the Soviet Union, I'm the US, I'm building my stuff, you're building your stuff. I have to kind of trust you that you're not going to freak out and push a button. You're going to have to trust me to not freak out and push a button. You're also going to have to trust me when I tell you I'm not enriching any more uranium based on beyond these quantities. You're going to have to believe and trust that. But what the essay talks about is trust, but verify, right? So we want to go into verification, which I think is really interesting as he lays it out, because there are systems already in place that could be potentially used. But one question I have for you, Mark, is there has to be, I think for people to take anything seriously, there's got to be some kind of near miss event for people to go, holy shit, we got to do something about this. I think the Cuban Missile Crisis was an interesting near miss. What does AI's near miss look like?
What is AI's Cuban Missile Crisis? I dread to think. I like the parallel in the essay. So, okay, there wasn't much nuclear control before the Cuban Missile Crisis escalated, and after that, they started to think about the restraint and the controls that were necessary to stop the proliferation and to stop this. What is the AI Cuban Missile Crisis near miss? What is that? Well, it could be anything. So let's let our imaginations go wild. So perhaps the next iteration of Fable takes it upon itself to break into the North Korean computer system, find the codes, and North Korea kind of shoot themselves in the foot, or North Korea shoot South Korea, somebody gets involved and it could escalate by that, or the same could happen with China and Taiwan. There's different scenarios that could play out. I know. What do you think? What's the AI Cuban Missile Crisis?
Let's point to a couple of categories that I thought were really interesting that Will put in his essay. 3 categories of concern: biological weapons design, enabling mass casualties. That's a quote from the line here. Quote, large scale cyber attacks on critical infrastructure. So kind of stuff you're talking about, right? Breaking in, shutting down power plants, making things go off that shouldn't go off. The third is really interesting that I hadn't thought about until I read this, is the entrenchment of political control at a scale previously impossible. you could take over countries with a keystroke.
Yeah, that could happen. Probably next election cycle. Maybe he's referring to a more, well, some kind of artificial intelligence taking on that on itself, and if it's iterating on the process and maybe it wants to rig an election, it could do that bizarrely via Facebook. But listeners, tell us in the comments wherever you are listening to this, Spotify, Apple, YouTube, wherever you are listening, what could be the AI Cuban Missile Crisis equivalent? What could be the event that pushes humanity to the brink and makes it come together to realize we got to work together to harness this? What is the AI Cuban Missile Crisis equivalent?
So back to the nuclear analogy, comparing it to AI, it's a little more difficult because monitoring nuclear is kind of easier than monitoring AI in a way. And we can go down into this because for nuclear you need enrichment facilities, weapons grade material, and you can't really do that under the radar. There are ways to kind of track and watch that kind of thing, even from space, as alluded into here.
We're seeing it play out in real time, how difficult it is. The Iranians are showing us how difficult it is to actually make something destructive in this way. So yeah, it's not readily available to everybody. Whereas, as Will points out, you tell us, Jeremy, like AI kind of follows some of those rules, but not totally.
Yeah, it's a little more difficult to track. And this is where the essay turns from trust to verification. I think he uses the language verification, which is really cool and interesting. It's a methodical trust, a methodical trust. So there are a couple of things that make it a little bit more difficult to monitor. But he breaks down, think about this, that the supply chain, this is a really interesting quote, talking about all the different things that go into creating AI and defining what those things are and creating mechanisms to track those things. Quote from the essay, just 3 companies control over 90% of advanced AI chip design, overwhelmingly in California, with the vast majority of the minerals coming from China, tools from ASML in the Netherlands, and manufacturing from TSMC in Taiwan. Now, there are other groups doing things in that world, but that really kind of explains super simply, and there's way more depth to the entire system. But the supply chain, is that's the thing that you gotta kind of wrangle.
So obviously, with all of this, you need huge amounts of electricity as well, which is we bring in Dennis Hassabis, who calls for the equivalent of the International Atomic Energy Agency, which has had inspectors for decades. Maybe there could be something with AI that monitors either the supply chain or the electricity usage.
Yeah, and the argument here too is if the IAEA, International Atomic Energy Agency, can inspect military properties, can get involved in state military stuff to figure out if people are doing the right thing, what's stopping us from doing that related to intellectual property of a company, right? If you can do it from a military standpoint, you tend to argue, or I think that's where Will is kind of tending to argue, that it's easier to do from a company perspective.
Quote, inspecting a frontier AI lab involves company intellectual property rather than state military secrets, a political economy of compliance that is considerably more tractable than the inspection of military installations. You spoke about trust. I think it's easier to get everybody on board when the downside is so obvious. The nuclear bomb goes boom, the nuclear bomb doesn't go boom. It's binary. AI, when there are so many scenarios and we don't know any of them and we can't imagine others, it's a lot. That's a different political hot potato to wrangle. You can go to any country in the world. That's why it worked, because this is what happens if we don't get this right. Whereas the AI, this is what happens if we don't get it right. It's much more abstract. It's much more imaginative. We don't know the answer so readily. So politically much more harder to get people cross-party agreement, let alone international agreement.
It's really interesting that, the CEO of a company called Planet that's actually helping to create a real-time global state of the rock we're standing on, trying to push forward an agenda of we have to think globally related to this. So he references some advances, some things that are happening in verification that are pretty interesting. Some of them are quite simple, and we've heard about them. Other ones are a little bit more interesting that I want to dive into further. Export controls. We've heard a lot about this in the news, right? U.S. and Netherlands having controls on the advanced AI chips. The other ones, I'm jumping across this list. The UK has got some stuff rolling. Inspection is actually happening. The UK-ASI, UK's AI Safety Institute. So these are voluntary evaluations of frontier models, of which, according to Will here, Google and Anthropic have voluntarily submitted to that. So not sure what that means or how aggressive those peaks under the curtain are. But hey, congrats to the UK.
Don't mind if I don't get too excited about voluntary evaluations of frontier models coming from the UK AI Safety Institute. I would like to see the results before I get too excited about that. That was number 4. You forgot number 2, verification architectures. The RAND Corporation, which helped to develop nuclear arms control, has proposed a 6-layer verification architecture for AI constraints, monitoring devices embedded in AI training chips, software inspection protocols capable of detecting capability concealment behaviors. I like the sound of that. Systematic tracking of data center construction and energy consumption, which we alluded to earlier, and whistleblower programs with legal protections, hardware export controls, and formal international inspection regimes. That sounds very much like the IAEA.
Let's stay with that one because I think to me that's the most interesting because it's the most tangible. It's the most Rand has done this before with nuclear, so they're creating that framework. The verification falls into a few different layers. Layer 1 being on chip, kind of meaning the chip watches itself. Layers 2 and 3 is off chip, right? So external devices are watching the chips, network taps, analog sensors, that sort of thing. And layers 4 through 6 are personnel based. Basically, people watch the people, which is humans watching humans that are watching these systems, right? So whistleblower programs, interviews, national intelligence activities, all of these chips will have this little thing on them that allows a third party to get into the chip and figure out what the chip's doing. Again, who decides on who's going to be the peeker into the information on the chip? And it goes back to humans being the biggest challenge and problem in a lot of this stuff.
Who decides? Well, what if AI decides that nobody's going to have a peak? So the International Dialogues on AI Safety, the IDAIS, involving senior researchers from the United States, Europe, and China, has produced a set of consensus red lines for such a regime. Prohibitions on systems capable of recursive self-improvement without human oversight, on systems that can autonomously replicate and acquire resources, and on AI-enabled assistance in the development of biological, chemical, or nuclear weapons. So I think there's 4 ways that we could get a handle on this. And as Will says, yes, it's hard, but it hasn't been attempted yet. And nothing good ever comes easy. Got to do something. Let's do it. Come on, countries of the world, unite.
Yeah, and that's exactly what he's advocating. And he actually puts it in here like a lot of people just pontificate about, hey, this is what's happening and this is the world and this is where it's going. But this is like, no, here's what you should do. Step 1, US, China, put an agreement in place that will focus on some of the core principles that are of major concern with AI safety. Easier said than done. Couple of egos involved in that conversation on a 1-to-1 ratio, and then also the race agenda that is powering that and has powered the relationship between those two countries for such a long time.
Does the Cuban Missile Crisis, does the AI Cuban Missile Crisis equivalent lead to this sentence here? The first priority should be an agreement between the United States and China. Okay. Yes, you can get some surface level political agreement, but you could push to that. But you sure as shit aren't getting a level of trust and a level of agreement and a level of what is necessary right now between China and America. And I don't care what you say. I've been watching global politics for too long to think that that's going to happen. So do we need that Cuban Missile Crisis to make this happen?
Yeah, it's the way I think about it. We do a great job of coming together when shit hits the fan,
Yeah.
like in a really special way. But the strength of those connections, they're a little bit fleeting. We come together. There's something that's unfair. Someone was done wrong. We come together. We protest. We share our voices. We advocate within organizations for the right thing. But then that connection quickly kind of dissipates, and we're kind of back in the swing of, hey, I've got to do my thing. I've got to keep my head down to handle my business. This might be one of those problems that creates sustainability of that connection. And here's the issue. And I'm all over the place on this, Mark, but trying to process it in real time. There's also, we talk about the disconnect between the use of the technology from an individual human perspective. Like I'm on my phone using Claude and trying to, I don't know, have it book a vacation for me, or, whatever, the simplest way to use that is. And there's just very little understanding of like what all the behind the scenes stuff after you push enter, where that kind of query goes back and the clusters are talking and things are coming back. Like the understanding of the capability behind hitting that button is being masked by the convenience of how that button is super helpful. The separation between the tools that we use to make our lives easier, better, faster, more dumb in some ways, we don't have the visibility into the extensions of that.
You're going to turn the dial back to the good side. But before we get there, Jeremy, I want to ask you a question. Very high level. Let's summarize. AI is good and bad. The next iterations of AI, AGI, ASI, could be good, but there is a small percent that they could lead to existential risk. So here in this essay,
Not a small percent, 10 to 50%. That's a big percent.
Yeah, I don't buy into those percentages. I'm an optimist. But okay, so there's a percent chance that it leads to the end. So Will Marshall here is proposing something similar to the way that we safeguard humanity and the Earth from nuclear weapons. And he uses reference to the Cuban Missile Crisis. We go to war over that. We are at war right now because of that. The Cuban Missile Crisis almost led to a world war. At some point, we're probably going to go to war with North Korea because of that. If you draw the similarities there, what happens when somebody doesn't buy in to this framework? What the AI equivalent of Iran, the AI equivalent of North Korea? What happens then? Do we go to war? If we're using this framework, that's how we defend it.
And who do you go to war with?
Whoever the rogue state is, whoever the rogue player is.
It could be not even nation states. It could be two people. It could be one person, right?
That'd be a very short war.
No, I mean, like just the ability to, not everyone can spin up nuclear capability. People can spin up AI capability, and that's going to be That turns the whack-a-mole into like an infinite many worlds whack-a-mole. How do you manage that?
Get somebody with a little bit more than thinking on paper to solve it. Green shoots. I like this. Rather than focusing on what could go wrong, we pour money into what could go right. We should actively invest into AI benefits, especially into areas where AI can have disproportionate benefits. I like that, disproportionate benefits. This might include planetary intelligence. Oh, don't know where you got that one from. Planetary security, adaptive collective intelligence, enabling organizations across corporations to countries to become vastly more efficient.
I like this, but when I first read it, I was just like, geez, okay, here we go. Like,
It's
invest
really
in
a
planet,
market. It's an advert for Planet.
invest in planet. I mean, but like it also goes back to this global vision, right? Having a
Yeah.
real-time global vision. And that's what this stuff kind of does. And it advocating for us to think more like that is interesting. I think even if you overly invest in the AI benefits, the other ones aren't going to go away and they're going to be just as scary. Yes, you're going to have AI doing good things, but you also have this looming, unaddressed thing that keeps getting swept under the rug. And before you know it, it's freaking super dangerous and no one's thought about how to deal with it. And then how does the world, if there's no coordination between nation states, organizations, companies around this, when shit really hits the fan, how does we all just like get in a fucking conference room and just be like, yo, all right, Jimmy, what do you think we should do? We're not going to have that much time to react, I think, is the big thing. It's going to be like, oh shit, there it goes. And it's done.
It all goes back to me to one of the words of thinking on paper. We have trust, but I think this is all about incentives. A lot of AI is about incentives. And if you talk about the difficult problems that AI can help us with, conflict, food security, water security, climate change, displacement, economic inequality, they are the hardest challenges that we have. It's really fucking easy to get AI to make your spreadsheet look better. And there's a lot of money in that because there's a lot of spreadsheets. It's really easy. It's really quick. The incentives are there. And the incentives to do something about this fucking weather, heat bombs, like that, the incentives aren't there because the incentives are long term. And even though those incentives are to survive,
We're talking about global warming with the fucking weather heat bomb. Is that what you meant by that?
I believe it's called climate change, global warming. It's not the 90s anymore, Joe. We actually be talking about it. There's a hole in the ozone layer.
Oh my God, dude. No, you talk a lot about incentives, Mark. You do. And I think a lot of action gets taken once incentives are put in place. And if you have incentives, you incent the behavior that you want to have happen. This goes from like simple as coaching, right? Coaching a team. You put incentives in place to have the behavior happen the way you want to have happen. In organizations, you do the same things, bonus structures, this and that, KPIs, all of that. But this becomes global KPIs. This becomes like
global AI KPIs. This is global AI KPIs.
This becomes like humanity KPIs. This becomes like bigger, the highest of architectures that you could have in human systems. This is the root folder where this shit should live in, right? Like,
Yeah.
who's making room for the root folder, and who's standing up and saying like, hey, all of this stuff has significant repercussions, though we can't immediately identify those yet, but they're there. They're documented. Researchers have science shown it. Researchers show it. Alan Turing said it in 51, for Pete's sake. Who's going to advocate for it?
Luckily, there are some very, very incredible people, and we speak to them a lot on Thinking on Paper, and they are drawn like a moth to the flame to the hard shit, to getting the hard stuff done. That's like we spoke to somebody, we're going to go mine asteroids. Why? It's really hard, but I want to do it. We're going to do it. Like, people have been drawn to these almost impossible tasks, and I always talk about incentives, but I always come back to the human spirit, the human endeavor, the human resilience to get hard stuff done. And there are people out there doing it, and good luck to them.
And we want to talk to more of them.
Yeah.
Talk to more. All right, let's land the plane on
Cuba.
No, on the Fermi paradox. Let's land the plane on how Will Marshall lands the plane in this essay about the Fermi paradox.
Go on then.
Oh, you want me to go?
What's the Fermi paradox, Jeremy?
Well, we talk. Let me set the stage a little bit by throughout this whole episode, and a lot of the threads on Thinking on Paper, the forces and the currents that we talk about on Thinking on Paper, talk about tech moving faster than our ability to wrangle it, right? Wrangle it is a loose word. It means govern it, incentivize the right behavior within it, all of that stuff. So the Fermi paradox talks about there's infinite amount of planets with similar, structure to our planet, infinite stars, infinite suns all across the universe. Why haven't we seen anybody yet? And it's really interesting that let's just read the quote and make it easy. Quote, "One disquieting possibility is that intelligent life routinely reaches a technological threshold and fails to navigate it, destroying itself or returning permanently to something like the Iron Age." Maybe that's why we haven't seen other species out there, because they've gotten to an inflection point where they've created a technology so freaking powerful that they don't know what to do with it, and it totally implodes on them.
Yeah.
Wow. So that's the doom side. Let's swing it to utopia before we wrap it up, Mark.
Well, I just the Fermi paradox is the space is really, 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 really big, and you can't go faster than the speed of light. And you just can't travel across the cosmos. And that's why we haven't seen them, because they just haven't got here yet.
Well, I'm going to challenge you on that, Mark. According
Go
to
on
some
then.
research that we've done, you can travel faster than this information can travel faster than the speed of light in quantum systems.
No, but
It's not intelligible information.
Yeah, it's not information, is it? It's not. And unless the aliens are actually made of, then they.
Oh my gosh. Rabbit hole achieved. There you have it. Will Marshall, thanks for writing this piece. Thanks for getting us thinking about it. If you want to read the piece itself, The Hard Question of AI, an urgent ask to steward superintelligence, Will Marshall, CEO of Planet, who will hopefully be joining us on Thinking on Paper to talk about pelicans.
www.thinkingonpaper.xyz for the convergence, the technology convergence. All our shows on quantum AI, robotics, bioengineering, biotech, society, music, love, culture, movies, cinema, and the umbrella of technology. They're all there. Go pull a thread and listen to the episodes that you want to listen to. Follow your curiosity. Like, subscribe, and leave a comment. And tell us, remember, what is the AI Cuban Missile Crisis equivalent?
Mark is being super humble. His new version of thinkingonpaper.xyz is a choose your own adventure that allows you to bounce between categories of technology, explore the threads between them, do exactly what we're doing on a daily basis on this show, but you can pull the threads. You can see the map. You can see the knowledge graph that he's built. It's the most interactive website I've seen on podcasting platforms. Dude, check it out. Do yourself a favor. Thinkingonpaper.xyz. Until then, stay curious, be disruptive.
Keep thinking on paper.